But first, we got to talk about Facebook and the potential antitrust action that is going to be coming maybe from the Federal Trade Commission. The Wall Street Journal reporting today that the FTC is preparing to file a possible antitrust lawsuit against Facebook after a year-long investigation into the company and its practices. Melody, this is part of the overall government scrutiny of Facebook. There has been talk in the past about breaking it up. So, what's the likelihood and what effect is this going to have?
Well, Julie, even as you were talking about the story, there are lots of caveats here, right? Facebook is still in the throes of making its own case to the commission. So yes, this Wall Street Journal article is sort of laying out the context, saying by year's end, it may be possible that there's a lawsuit here, but that is by no means a guarantee. I do want to point out that a majority of the 5-member FTC would need to vote in favor of the lawsuit. The commission currently has 3 Republicans. It's led by Chairman Joseph Simons, and there are 2 Democrats. Overall, as you point out, there has been bipartisan support and scrutiny of these big tech companies. And we know that the Justice Department, which shares responsibility for antitrust regulation with the FTC, is about to perhaps file a lawsuit against Alphabet, the parent company of Google. What I want to point out, though, and taking a step back here, is that the FTC approved of Facebook's acquisition of WhatsApp, Facebook's acquisition of Instagram, the dozens of other ones in between that are much smaller in size. But from Facebook's perspective, just to play devil's advocate here, I know we often don't defend them. They went through the proper protocols, right? At the time, Instagram was a very nascent company. They were not what we know it to be today. They had just rebranded from Bourbon. They were trying to figure themselves out. They sold for $1 billion. And in retrospect, of course, it's easy to say that it was inevitable that Instagram would have been able to survive as a standalone company. But I think this sort of rumination about a potential lawsuit kind of brings up these arguments, right? Was it because of Facebook that these companies are now successful? And yes, perhaps there is this monopolistic entity now, but the FTC and the Justice Department were sort of along for the ride all along. There was very little pushback earlier on, except a few dissents here and there.
Absolutely, Melody. And I think just going back to your point on Facebook's perspective, I think that's something that Mark Zuckerberg himself had brought up at that House antitrust subcommittee hearing back in July when he was pressed by Representative Jerry Nadler in that very heated exchange over the fact that essentially Nadler claiming that Facebook's acquisition of Instagram had been to neutralize a competitor. And while Zuckerberg did acknowledge that and the fact that Instagram was both a competitor and potentially a complement to the service, he also noted that back in 2012, it wasn't guaranteed that Instagram would grow to the size that it was then, that $1 billion acquisition had been a huge bet on the future growth of that company that did scale to the size that it is today under Facebook. So I do think there is quite a bit of controversy, definitely arguments to be had on both sides. And I think that's why we continue to get incremental updates from both the FTC, from Facebook on this front, and why this is just so controversial overall in terms of big tech and antitrust concerns.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.